So how do you know you're pregnant? It's a good question because quite often, because most women and girls aren't necessarily keeping a record of their cycles and aren't necessarily sure when the next one should come, although if they're having a bleed every month, they can maybe roughly know. Not all women are tuned into that, so sometimes girls and women find that they are aware that they have their periods, but suddenly at some point this period's not coming. There's a delay in the period, there's a delay in the bleeding days, or there's even a missed period altogether, or there's strange bleeding patterns that happen and they're not quite sure what's going on. So what can happen once once conception has occurred, it takes about 6 days for the embryo to travel from the end of the fallopian tube into the uterus, into the womb. So that takes about 6 days. Somewhere between day 6 and day 9 is when the embryo comes into the womb and it tries to implant. And for some women, though they may not know this at the time, when that implantation happens, there can be a little bit of bleeding down below, a little bit of patchiness. Might be fresh blood, it might be brown bleeding, that shows on their underwear or shows on the toilet paper when they go to go to the toilet. And that's an unusual sort of bleed for them. It's not their period, but it's like a light patch of bleeding. That's can be what we call implantation bleeding, which is a result of that embedding of the embryo into the womb lining. That can be the very earliest sign for some women that implantation has happened, that they're pregnant and the baby's implanting. And that's a sign that some women get and some don't. Most women don't know about that sign. They wouldn't even know that that's what it means. And there are other reasons why abnormal bleeding can happen too, because if you've got a polyp or a cyst or a fibroid, that can cause abnormal bleeding too. But if you're one of those girls or women who kind of know their cycle a little bit and are expecting their period but it hasn't come, but they've noticed this very light patchy bleed, that can be a very early sign to alert them to the fact that they're pregnant and the embryo is already implanted. Some of the other early signs that they may notice are the need to go to the toilet more frequently, or what we call urinary urgency, more than normal, having to urinate more frequently than normal. Some girls and some women notice like a sort of squirmy sort of feeling in their stomach. Something's going on. There's like they've described it as a squirmy feeling in the abdominal area, usually around the time that they should get their period or some of the weeks afterwards. That's another sign. And starting to feel a little nauseous is another one, or feeling suddenly very tired. These are very early signs that a girl or a woman is pregnant, can be pregnant, and without them realising it. So these early signs are good to tune into, they're good to understand and kind of make sense of, because if you just go and do a pregnancy test, again, sometimes it's too early for the pregnancy test to show that a woman's pregnant. Sometimes it's beyond the time frame. When it's not really until around 17 days after ovulation or the release of the egg has happened that you can detect pregnancy on those test kits. So some girls who think, am I pregnant or not? I'm not sure, I'll just go and test. Sometimes they don't get a positive pregnancy test back because it's too early for the pregnancy hormones to be detected through those pregnancy test kits. Sometimes they go and there's a positive pregnancy test, but they're probably thinking, well, how, when, what's going on? Think back to those signs and symptoms that they may have noticed, and that can be a help to them. But some women don't know because there's no symptoms and signs yet at that early stage. So that's why it's so important to take a deep breath when these things happen, not to panic, to think, to feel what the body's saying, what it's doing, because something something's happening, something incredible is actually happening on that level. And, you know, even though it's tiny little embryo, tiny little cells multiplying and dividing, there's a lot of activity going on, and the body's already starting to prepare and change from that process onwards. It's like an explosive, incredible event that's happening, and it's important not to rush into anything, to take time to think, ponder, learn about these early days, to see what's actually going on, because something profound is happening, has happened, and it is happening. And sometimes we can be overwhelmed with the thoughts of but, how am I going to cope with this or that, or what about this or that, or I'm in this really challenging situation. But it's important to, but just take that deep breath and be calm, and try and think calmly and logically, and get really good advice from the right people. Yeah.